Hey family, Dr. Dandridge here. Have you ever wondered why African American funerals here inside of the United States are so over the top? Well, there's actually some connections to our African heritage. So let's talk about it, all right? Welcome back to another conversation from the desk of Dr. Dandridge, where culture, theology, and the African diaspora come together for meaningful conversation. Today, we're digging deep, literally and spiritually, into the artistry of Ghanaian funerals. Now, I know what you're thinking. Funerals are a time of sorrow, but in Ghana, especially among the Ga people, funerals are a celebration, an elaborate send off that honors the life, status, and legacy of the deceased. And at the center of this celebration, an unforgettable casket. Yes, caskets shaped like fish, airplanes, microphones, Bibles, and even Coca-Cola bottles. But before you shake your head, let's take a look at the beauty, the meaning, and the theology behind it all. In Ghana, funerals aren't quick, quiet affairs. They're spiritual ceremonies, theatrical displays of grief, celebration, and identity. Among the Ga people in particular, it's not unusual to see someone buried in a casket shaped like a Mercedes Benz if they were a taxi driver, or a cocoa pod if they were a farmer. These are known as fantasy coffins or abebu adake, literally proverb boxes. These coffins tell stories. They proclaim what mattered to that person while they were alive. It's visual testimony, a cultural obituary carved in wood. It might seem extravagant or even comical to outsiders, but in Ghanaian tradition, these caskets aren't frivolous. They're sacred symbols, capturing one's essence, work, and dreams. Death in this view isn't the end, it's the beginning of ancestral life. And in that transition, presentation matters. Let's not pretend that biblical tradition doesn't value burial practices. In Genesis, the 50th chapter and the 26th verse, we're told that Joseph died at the age of 110, and they embalmed him, and he was placed in a coffin in Egypt. That's the first and only time the word coffin appears in the entire Bible. Even more in 2 Kings, the 13th chapter and the 21st verse, we see the power of legacy in burial. It says, once while some Israelites were burying a man, suddenly they saw a band of raiders and they threw the man's body into Elisha's tomb. When the body touched Elisha's bones, the man came to life and stood up on his feet. So burial isn't just a formality, it's a spiritual moment, a sacred space. In both African and biblical contexts, what surrounds your body at death speaks volumes about how you lived. In Ghanaian culture, the casket literally says, this person mattered. Their story matters. Let's talk home for a minute, right here inside the United States. African American communities have long embraced funeral traditions that center on the identity of the deceased. You may not see fish shaped coffins in Mississippi, but you will see custom caskets with murals, scripture verses, fraternity colors, and even rhinestones on caskets. We host themed funerals with Harley Davidsons rolling down the aisle, full choir processions, and even dancers in kente cloth. It's the same spirit, the desire to say, this was not just a death, this was a life, a soul, a story. Even the phrase homegoing service is distinctly African American. It traces back to our deep belief that this world is not our final home and echoes Ghanaian thought, the fact that death is not departure, it's actually return. Funeral artistry in our tradition is not extravagance, it's resistance to invisibility. It's our way of declaring we may have overlooked or been overlooked in life, but we will be honored in death. In both Ghanaian and African American traditions, funeral practices are sermons. The casket becomes a pulpit, preaching joy, sorrow, pride, and faith. That's why in the book of Psalms, the 116th chapter and the 15th verse, it hits differently inside of this context when it says, "Precious in the sight of the Lord is the death of his saints." This isn't about glorifying death. No, it's about dignifying life. To be buried in a casket that reflects who you were is to say, I wasn't just a number, I was a name. I was a nurturer, an artist, a hustler, a dreamer, and I mattered. That's the power behind these visual, artistic expressions. Now, of course, not everyone agrees with these practices. Critics say they're too expensive, too showy, too culturally irreverent. But I say this: every culture has its way of honoring the dead. Some light candles, some wear black for a year, others literally build pyramids. The real question is, does our funeral reflect our theology? If we believe in resurrection, should our funeral not also reflect hope? If we believe in legacy, shouldn't our burials celebrate the journey? And if our lives had flavor, rhythm, and meaning, shouldn't our farewells do the same? Here's what I'll leave you with. The gospel doesn't tell us to avoid death. It tells us that death has been redefined. Romans, the 6th chapter and the 4th verse says, "We were buried with him through baptism into death, in order that just as Christ was raised from the dead, we too may live a new life." Funerals, especially in the African world, aren't just a goodbye, they're a testimony, a remix of grief and glory, a final dance with memory and meaning. So, whether it's a casket shaped like a pineapple in Ghana or one covered in sorority colors in Detroit, it all points to this truth: your life matters, your story matters, your soul still sings. Thanks for joining me at my desk. I'm Dr. Dandridge. If this conversation stirred something inside of you about how we honor life, how we approach death, or even how we celebrate legacy, do me a favor, like this video, share it with someone who needs it, and maybe even pre-plan your own homegoing with purpose and personality. Because when the last note is played, may your life be the melody that no one forgets.